All right. I wanted to do a quick video. I'm gonna try to do a real quick video. This is in response to a video I saw, and it was called "The Downfall of the Home Recording Studio." And and if you want to know, because I'm not gonna post a link, I'm not gonna add a link to the description. You can actually probably YouTube search it and see for yourself. And I watched quite a bit of that video, and I was like, so that was my reaction. Like, I think the guy, he was saying basically a lot of people's home recording studios still sound like home recording studio mixes or whatever, recordings or whatever. And he had some reasons why. Well, the only reason, and I'm going to say this, the only reason if someone does a recording in their home and they don't, and it sounds basic when we saying a home recording studio sound like a home recording studio, it's like almost still trying to say sound like it's still amateur level. The only reason why that would be is because the people that are doing their recordings and their mixing just aren't very good at recording and mixing yet. That would be it. But if a person knows what they're doing in their home recording studio, and they get you're not gonna be able to tell the difference between if they recorded it at home or they did it in a professional commercial studio building. The only really difference between this, of course, partially would be gear. And it really depends on the recording, because sometimes a lot of gear isn't necessary. You can get away with a lot of stuff with just plugins, which is just software emulations of gear. It's just an emulation of a gear. The difference is our ears. Can we actually can we differentiate the difference in what we're hearing when we're listening to a plugin or we're listening to an actual piece of gear? For the most part, we can't, especially when you got a mix going on and you got multiple sources, vocals, instruments. You got so many instruments, so many tracks, so many vocals, and you got all these plugins and processing going on. You really, a lot of times, you can't hear a tremendous amount of difference. Now, emulations may sound more prevalent in an acoustic, like in a band, than it would be more like electronic instruments, samples, digital instruments, and so forth. But that's pretty much the basis of it. And then he was saying that he noticed that he listened to a lot of recordings, and they sound like home recording. I'm like, he listened to a lot of people's home studio recordings and mixes, and it sound like they're doing it. It definitely sound like they're doing it at home. And I'm like, whose mixes and recordings are you listening to? So this all subjective, because I've done I've done videos on how to set up your DAW. I've seen where people were making, for example, it's kind of like this. The reason I'm looking out the window because I got someone coming, and I wanted to make this video right quick before they had to come pick up their car. You have to think of it when your interface is going to respond according to how you set up your mixer in your DAW. If you set up your mixer to like it is because like a console, then it will react that way because it's coded and programmed to react like a console. The only really difference between your DAW's mixer and an actual real mixer is a real mixer is just everything's already set. You only have so many channels, so many auxiliaries, so many buses. That's it. In a DAW, you just have to set that stuff up. Most DAWs don't come with the auxiliary. You actually have to add the auxiliary channels. Most DAWs don't come with buses. You have to add those buses. One program would be like Harrison Mix Bus. Well, they start off with 8 or 16 buses already. So all you gotta do is implement auxiliary channels. So the thing that I've always said and this is things that I've seen when people are setting up their DA, when they're setting their mixes, is they want to add every single effect, reverb, compressor, EQ on every single channel, and it'll be in their tracking window. It won't even be in the mixing window. They'll start adding all their plugins and all that, and they're mixing from their tracking window, which is, that's the screen of your DAW where you got where you see all the waveforms from what you recorded, or the MIDI information from what you recorded on that page. Instead of actually, once they've done their recording, actually switch over to their actual mixer page. Some people actually switch to their mixing page to mix, but they'll try to do everything. A lot of people will try to do everything from their editing page or their tracking page, and you're not really supposed to do that when you're ready to mix. You're only supposed to do that when you're editing your tracks. So I've seen people do that. I've seen it start adding 3, 4, 5, 6,000 plugins on per channel on every single channel, and that's not really the way to do that. It's like this. The reason why commercial studios worked so well the way they did on a console was what they would do. This is what they would do, and 90% of all engineers do this, is they'll have all the tracks, they'll have like a kick drum, snare, toms, overheads, room mics and stuff like that, right? This it'll be like, we're talking about, and I'm gonna do a video on modern recording compared to old school recording. So I'm still looking out the window because I don't know when they're gonna show up. And then they would have, maybe bass, guitar, second guitar, maybe keys or organ or whatever, another set of instruments, horns or whatever, maybe then vocals, backgrounds, and so forth. And most of the time it's 24 tracks for the most part. Sometimes people would do everything on 16-track recorder. Some people would have 24 tracks. That was pretty much the recording standard, was between 16 and 24. Sometimes 8, 16, 24. Depends on how many track count that studio had for recording. Some studios only had an 8-track reel-to-reel. Some had a 16-track reel-to-reel. Some had a 24-track. A 24-track recording studio was high-end. That's the big machine with the 2-inch tapes. Those were high-end. So they would have a high-end console. Sometimes we would have dual 24 tracks, and they would add a symphony time code, which is a sync code to sync both machines, so they both start at the same time, so they can record up to 47, 46 tracks. So whenever when they had symphony time code on the track, when they hit play, it would immediately trigger the other tape machine to start playing. Just like with ADAT machines. ADAT machines sync together through a cable. They sync each other. They see time code. They sync by time code. That's why each ADAT machine, which is 8 tracks each, can start playing at the same time. Excuse me. Same thing with Tascam machines. And then they just came up with just 24 disc hard disk recorders all in one unit. And this just goes on and on and on. But that's so the auxiliary sends would say, okay, like this board would have 24, this is a 48 board. So auxiliary, so if I want to send this kick or these toms or these guitars or whatever to a reverb unit, I would run the auxiliary out. The return from one of the effect units would then come back into the board either through through an auxiliary return or another set of channels. Most of the time you run another set of channels, so you can blend your whatever you want to blend, whatever your recording tracks you want to blend with that with your auxiliary, so that way I want to send this to one. I want to send these drums to a particular reverb unit. I want to send my vocals to a different reverb unit. Let's say that one reverb unit might have a hall, like a concert hall setting, and I'll set my delay and decay and diffusion and all that on that unit. And then I might have vocals and whatever, or maybe a chamber hall or whatever, maybe some or delay or something. And I'm gonna blend those returns on different channels, so I would run on a separate set of different returns, auxiliary sends and returns on the vocals. Then I might want to run the instruments too, like a hall or chamber reverb as well. So that's gonna be on its own auxiliary send and returns. But they're never, the reverb units and delays are never on the tracks themselves. They're always on separate tracks. So if you set your DAW up that exact same way, you're going to pretty much generally get the exact same effect. A lot of times, sometimes when they had limited inputs and outputs to go to recording source or whatever, they would group certain instruments all into one. Like they would create a drum bus or a vocal bus or instrument bus. So they say, okay, I'm gonna send all my drums here on 8, all these 8 tracks down to just buses 1 and 2. So now, let me see here. Let me turn my phone down. So I would probably create a drum bus. Maybe 1 and 2 would be my drum bus. Well, if you do that in your DAW as well, you run all your drums into a drum bus, so that way I can add its own set of compressors, like a a certain compressor on the drum bus. So that way all the drums have the same type of compression, instead of having a compressor on each individual channel, unless you're trying to compress a kick or snare, whatever, purposely, and you only want the kick or the snare to be compressed by a certain compressor only, then you would insert it on that channel only. Other than that, most of the time you'll take all those drums and you drum into a drum group. So I assign that to 1 and 2. Now it's going to go to 1 and 2. Then I can add my compressor on the 1 and 2, whatever compressor, as a drum bus, as a master drum bus compressor for that group on these 2 right here. And I would set up the compressor for that. Same thing if I want to do, or the EQ. I want my, instead of just use EQ in each individual group or each individual drum, I might want to also have an overall EQ on the actual master drum group here. You do that in your DAW as well. So if you're doing that, the results, because believe it or not, the master output of your interface will still react as if you were coming to the master output of your master output on a console. So when you listen to your speakers coming out of your master out of your audio interface, it's like listening to the master bus, the master channel, the master bus, the main bus, the actual final, where everything's going through the master. Like my 2 yellow ones right here is my master. So everything would eventually gonna come out. So when I'm listening to the speakers, I'm listening to the final master out. So you can set up your master bus where you're gonna have your master, like Notorious, the most famous one was the SSL bus compressor. That would be on the master channel. And they would set the master on the console. They would have the SSL bus compressor. And they may have an EQ or whatever. So everything that's blending with those auxiliary sends for those auxiliary channels, your groups and all that, is all being routed to your master out. If you do that in your DAW, you're going to get pretty much the exact same results as it would be done on a large format console. I'm not going to be very, very long on that because I really wanted to do a tutorial on that, to really explain that in details through another video when I do another recording song. But I want to explain that because I was like, I don't see how. The only reason why someone, if they are not getting results to make it sound like they did this in a commercial studio, is because they don't know what they're doing, and they're not using the tools properly. They're not using their reverbs properly. They're not using their delays properly. They're not using their compressors, their EQs. They're not setting up their DAW properly. And if you don't set up your DAW, the mixer is not going to react. You want to set up your mixer like an actual analog console, because that's how it's designed and programmed in DAWs, like an actual analog console. That's why they look like analog consoles. You know, when you in your DAW, that's why your mixer emulates it looks like a, you know, they're all really, really similar. Now they all have their own design, but they pretty much look like analog consoles when you go to the digital mixer in your DAW. That is not by accident. That's by design. The thing is, when these people design these DAWs, Pro Tools, Logic Pro, Reaper, Reason, Cakewalk, whatever, the companies don't care if you know how to use a console. They only care that you bought the software. It is on you to know how to use the stuff. Now, there are tutorials and help and manuals on these DAWs, but most people don't read them. So, what I should do, and if I remember to do this, is I need to do a tutorial on how to set up your DAW for recording, editing, getting it ready for mixing, and how to use the digital mixer, if people are interested in that. And I will show you how to it's done through your DAW, and I can also show you how it's done on an actual console. And if you I always do everything in my DAWs. If I'm going to use the mixer and I'm just going to mix through the DAW's mixer only, I always set up my digital mixer like an actual console. It will react that way in the software like an actual console to get that commercial sound. You just have to know how to do that. And that's what they don't tell. A lot of people don't know, I didn't know to set up separate auxiliary channels and bus channels and set up drum group buses and or vocal group buses, or this is one reason why Harrison Mix Bus is called Harrison Mix Bus. To mix group mixing into buses to create your output. That's the reason why it's called Harrison Mix Bus, for bus channels. Bus channels is one of the things that's done when it comes to consoles, is busing, auxiliaries, and they're using inserts. How to use inserts on channels, how to set up auxiliaries in channels, how to set up buses on consoles. If you're not using a real console, you at least need to know how to do that in your DAW. And then your output of your audio interface will act as the master output of a console in your audio interface when you're listening through to your speakers. You just have to know how to do that. Other than that, that's going to do it for the video. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.